February in the year 2021. It is a continuation of Black History Month 2021. My name is Christopher Jones, welcoming you to the APNU AFC lunch break as we continue to look at everything political during your lunch period. Today on the program, I will be having with me members of Parliament Annette Ferguson and Jurita Finance and Maureen Philadelphia. And amongst the topics we will be discussing with you today range from the attempts by the People's Progressive Party Civic to dominate everything political in the National Assembly and in public life. Of course, we will be discussing the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, and of course, Jurita Finance will take us through the paces as it relates to that. The upcoming sitting of the National Assembly, which is going to be had tomorrow, Thursday, the 4th of February, and of course, the reason for the disallowment of the Henry Boyce motion, which was brought by Gita Finance. Annette Ferguson, Jurita Finance, good day to you both. Welcome to lunch break.
A pleasant afternoon to you, Chris. Thank you for having me on your program and with my colleague, your co guest, I think, or my co guest, Jarita. Pleasant afternoon to you, my dear.
Good afternoon, Chris. Good afternoon, Annette. It's a pleasure being here today.
Hmm.
Excellent. And I'm very pleased too that both your audio and video are on par because we had some technical challenges day before yesterday when we spoke with Gita Edmond.
Yeah.
Gita Edmond. All right, guys. So quickly, I want to get from you your perspective on the photograph, the painting that went viral on Sunday last. I know a lot of views being shared all around, but it continues to be a nuisance in society. We saw yesterday PVP Charles Ramson in on his Facebook tweet put out that quote, if you have a problem with the painting and you don't have a problem with 7,000 sugar workers that were dismissed, let me get the quote properly, then you have a serious problem. Something to that effect. I will have the operator put that up on screen. But I want to hear from both of you first in terms of your perspective in terms of the portrait, how you see it. I know there was a publication of an apology or an explanation rather from the youngster that painted the portrait. The portrait.
Okay.
You wanna, sorry. Okay, Melanie, keep going.
All right. Thank you, Christopher. Yes, I did notice the portrait along with a number of comments coming from all cross sections of our society, both locally, regionally, and if I can go a bit further, internationally. That portrait perpetuated a high level of condemnation, and it also allowed for public debate. I know for a fact that the artist, I think one Courtney Douglas, if I got the name correctly, that after you might have recognized what the public's view of the portrait was, he subsequently put out an apology, which did not even, was accepted by a number of our people, because more so persons of African descent. Um, we have been, we call it, we have been, we think it was an embarrassment and a disrespect to our nationality or race. That being said, is that the young man did give an explanation from his side how he probably viewed things, and what he further stated in the apology note is that he was trying to portray Guyana as one. But I mean, you can't portray Guyana as one knowingly that Guyana is made up of six people, right? And the portrait clearly outlined, the two main dominant ethnicities, that is Afro Guyanese and Indo Guyanese. And I think what further caused the whole tension or the debate is how the young how the portraits were actually more so from the African point of view, how that portrait with a young mother and and her child, though we would have seen that where he would have taken that portrait from is basically, the young woman was seated on a bed in the Georgetown Hospital, I assume, with baby in hand, right? But how it is being painted or portrayed is that as though the woman is kneeling, right, and the little child with a bag, and I think depicted on that bag one Guyana or something to that effect. So what crossed my mind first is that if you want to portray Guyana as one, why use the two main ethnic grouping also inclusive of a child? So for me, I felt insulted. I think it was a slap in the Afro Guyanese face, though his apologies were given. But I think, and it came at a bad time, a time when we were actually now preparing to celebrate, African month, from 1st of February 2021.
Black
And
History
then,
Month.
yeah, Black History Month. And then to see Charles Ramson come in with a comment that is way off from what the portrait actually depicted, to place that 7,000 people were placed on the breadline. We don't need to go there, because if you want to talk about 7,000 people being placed on the breadline, then we can say that, post August 2nd, 2020, look how many persons have been placed on the breadline. Because I sure if we to do a survey of the 7,000 persons that were actually placed on the breadline as he claimed in the sugar industry, you have a mixture of persons there, right?
Yeah.
You have a mixture of persons there in comparison to what actually happened in August, and which continues a day like today, where thousands of predominantly Afro Guyanese are being placed on the breadline. And Chris, like Joretta and myself, that it was never our intention to purposely put persons on the breadline. What we did, and we keep hearing about, the APNU AFC government, we downsided the sugar industry. We tried to fit it right or right side it, because sugar is dead. Sugar
Yeah.
is dead. And what we did is that the persons who were laid off, those persons were actually compensated with their severance pay. So for
Correct.
Charles Ramson to make that kind of comparison, it belittles. I can only describe it this way, that it belittles him. So
Right.
that's
So
the point I would want to make.
great. Thank you, Alex. Jurito, I mean, essentially, you would have seen the post there from Charles Ramson, but more particularly is that this is the individual who has responsibility for culture, youth, and sport in Guyana. And more so recently, as you know, this same ministry carried with it the Department of Social Cohesion. So there is some amount of expectation out of a Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport that its leadership will recognize when a certain population or a certain amount of the populace are offended by something. But instead of looking at it from that perspective, Charles Ramson sought to take it into a new direction. It is almost like a confirmation that the People's Progressive Party Civic sees Gaisuko as an Indian-based support mechanism in place. What's your view on Charles Ramson's post, Jarita?
Actually, Chris, I actually want to weigh in on the actual painting that
Yeah.
we're discussing also before we even get to Mr. Ramson's post. And the truth is, as young political leaders in society in Guyana, it is a task at hand before us. Racism and dealing with the aspects, the challenges that comes with racism. It is no easy challenge. And when I think about anything that is related to race and racism, I try to remove my emotions from the entire process and try to be quite rational about with my line of thinking on the matter. First, I think all the years in Guyana we had well, art has been in existence for a while, and this is one of the first time we had such a national discussion on any piece of art whatsoever. And to be fair, I have to highlight the fact that I believe this particular artist would have painted several paintings before of different type of leaders. I think he even did some with David Granger and Sandra Granger and so forth. Now, coming to this particular painting, I would have been on Facebook and I saw the comments and I saw everything that was being said, and we have to, for the first thing we need to do as leaders is to acknowledge when people are hurt. We cannot just push it aside and try to say, well, you should not be hurt. It's nobody's responsibility to say how somebody should feel about something. What we need to do is to acknowledge that and to see what we need to do to move forward with that. The fact that this art piece was even put out, I think, I don't know if any discussion was had with the artist himself. I know besides the apology that was put out, but I personally, and I'll read this because it's pretty short.
Sure.
And I did say something online about it, and I captioned my post that racism is a disease that is worse than any other. And I tagged the artist in it, and I said the level of ethnic division in Guyana is sickening, and it does not take much to ignite the flames of racism. And sadly, the painting was fuel to such. As a people, we are completely broken along racial lines, and every time you pick up your paintbrush, you must remember that. When you did the painting and sketch of the Henry Boys and Harry Singh, it was well received because art is powerful, and you must never forget that. I can say much about your character and ethnic diversity and your ethnic diversity, but all of that does not matter at this time, and it will not aid in moving forward. What matters is an entire ethnicity felt offended by the painting because it depicts what we have been fighting to remove for years, a nasty stereotype that we inherited as a people, one that elevates one ethnicity above the others. So the comments under the painting is testimony to the depth of the hurt that is perpetuated from racial tension. It is a brutal reality for Guyanese. As young people, we must first understand where we are and how we got here in order to get where we need to be. Now that you have seen the power of art, use it wisely. And I ended my statement by saying, Amanda Gorman wrote, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to speak and if only we're brave enough to be it. And I say that, Chris, because we inherited this issue in Guyana with racial tension. It is not something that we created. We were born into this. And we need to understand that we need to be this change moving forward. And I can tell you, we can see her, when persons wrote their comments, you can feel hurt in it, you can feel anger, and it is justifiable because everyone have historical pathway of their life that they have come to. We don't know how people got to where they are today. We don't know what they have been through. And more importantly, I cannot speak, and none of us could speak to an individual's experiences when it comes to racial hostility in this country. I say that, and now I can move forward to Mr. Ramson's post. Mr. Ramson's post in particular was, and his post, all his posts, I must say, it is without consideration. It is politically naive. It is as he writes as though he is not a minister. He writes as though he doesn't have a responsibility to portray leadership to people. And when it is juvenile, it is childish, it is blatantly insulting to try to ignore where the issue lies and try to cover it up with sugar workers. This has nothing to do with sugar workers. And don't you dare just say sugar workers are only African Guyanese. That by itself is a falsehood, right? So we can have And I believe it is very important. I know the coalition is the best representation of diversity in politics in Guyana. We have to acknowledge that we have an issue as a people. We have to acknowledge, first of all, that racism is felt and racial hostility is felt by across the board. It's not just to one particular race. And I challenge people to think for themselves and to think that once growing up in Guyana, if I dare say that I do not believe that there's one person that did not experience once, at least once in their life, some form of racism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that we cannot continue to hurt each other. We cannot continue to have this embedded fear for another race. We cannot continue to have this embedded anger towards another race. We need to move past that. And we
I
can
agree.
only dream of that day that we can do it. But we have to be this change. We have to embody the change that we look forward to see.
All right.
That's
Chris, if I can quickly make,
No,
Chris, if
just before you, Annette, because I need us to get to the other topic before the time expires. But I allow you to come in immediately after Annette. I'll ask the operator to quickly put on screen. Now, what he's about to put on screen is essentially the Facebook group, which is titled "Beauty of Little Guyana." Now, this site has approximately about 2,000 something persons who have been following this site. And essentially what they do from time to time, they post beautiful pictures, images of Guyana, overnight shots of the city and so forth. So it was on this page in which the painting was first publicized. Now, after Sunday's publication and it went viral, and persons expressed their displeasure and how offended they are as it relates to the photo. The very page that is on Facebook, which is titled Beauty of Little Guyana, instead of taking the necessary action to start to remove the image from their site, what they start to do is to put up an argument. And as you can see there, so here is what Beauty of Little Guyana said. Everything in Guyana is about race and politics. No wonder Guyana can never move forward because group of people always bring down their Guyanese race. If an Indian does anything, it's a problem. If an African does anything, it's a problem. Now, the statement by the site itself further enraged the situation because all that is required of them is simply this. A large section of the Guyanese society expressed their displeasure. They indicated in words that they are offended by the image. What most sites simply do is simply just remove the image and put up a statement saying, after an overwhelming response from the Guyanese population stating that they are offended by the image, we have taken a decision to remove it. But instead of that, the site, Beauty of Little Guyana, puts out this statement saying that everything in Guyana is about race, even though a significant amount of the population have indicated to them that they are offended by the site, by the image.
Because Chris, I think the assumption that you're making is that you have a rational person in the background running that page. And the truth be told, you have any Tom, Dick, and Harry that is empowered to create a page and to say what they want on it, right? And it is completely disheartening. It is I think issues like these are things that the ERC needs to get on. You can't have a page just blatantly coming out and not acknowledging what an issue is and just feel like they can say anything that they want. And but accountability when it comes to social media and things that are posted there, it is horrible. It is almost zero the level of accountability. What I can further say is but first, this is the first time I've heard about the page, to be honest with you. With this painting, I've never heard of the page before. But what we have seen over the years, and even coming on to the last election, is that Facebook was used to ignite racism in Guyana. These little posts were used to stir up tensions and to bring this divisiveness that was necessary for the PPP to push forward with, dare I say, that. And that's just the brutal truth. And it it is my hope, it is my plea with Guyanese, right-thinking Guyanese, regardless of your ethnicity, to when we see these things reported, we should be going in our hundreds and reporting a page that is something like that. Even with Charles Ramson's page that was so blatantly ridiculous, person should be reporting it because we need to fight it. And this is my point, Chris. We cannot just look at it. We cannot just bring it to light if we are not willing to put mechanisms in place to fight it. We have to fight racism. I'm a mother. I have 2 little girls. I do not want them to have to grow up in a country with the divisiveness that we see it as today. My children are pretty much mixed up in ethnicity. I want them to be able to see persons based on character and not color. And that's the way in which I taught them. And the only way we can move forward, and I would think it is justifiable for everyone to be able to kind of take a public stance against racism. This is the platform we need to be championing as leaders, budding leaders in society. It is our responsibility to make sure that we bring this issue to light, that we are the persons that are steering this campaign against racism and racial hostility in this country.
Excellent point. All right, so we're going to move now to the other subject, the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee in the National Assembly. Last Monday, at a sitting there, a motion was brought by the PPP. A motion was brought by the PPP to remove Mr. David Patterson as the chairman of the PAC. I know we haven't spoken at full length as it relates to this matter, but Jarita, you are a member of the PAC. Walk us through what transpired and walk us through what cannot happen and what will happen, what the actions will be taken by the coalition.
Well, Chris, what I can say to you is that at last Monday's PAC, because PAC meets every Monday because we have so much work that is lagging behind. I know the opposition side of the House, we were willing to meet even more regularly than Mondays, but the government side was saying that they can't make those timings and all of those things. They were making excuses that why we should not meet more than just the one Monday. Moving fast forward to what happened on Monday. We met on Monday and Mr. Shearer got up and basically tabled a motion that to remove Mr. Patterson of the PAC with utterances of that they have no confidence in him. Mind you, a no confidence motion cannot be brought to the level of the committee. A no confidence motion has to be brought to the House. However, that motion was brought. The motion was given. There was no reason behind why they wanted Mr. Patterson removed as chairman of the PSC. And that was one of the most alarming things, because how can you get up at a meeting and say, well, we no longer want this person to be chair because we have 5 members and you have 4, we can do what we want. That's basically what the PPP attempted to do. We a discussion, Mr. Patterson allowed a discussion to be had, comments to be made from both sides, both the government and the opposition side, on the motion that was put to the floor. There were arguments from the opposition side against it, of course, and the government side basically was saying that they did not give any stand in order that they were bringing this motion regarding. Mr. Shearer was asked to quote the standing order in which she is bringing the motion on. She was like, she doesn't have to do that. She doesn't have to state that and all of these things. But I can just cut it to short and say that after the discussion was had, Mr. Edgell, in his arguments, he was adamant that Mr. Patterson should not preside over, but he should not be in the seat of the chair while a discussion is being had about a motion that requires him not to be the chair. Mm. The clerk was calling. Because challenges was made to whether or not the motion was properly put. Mr. Maipaul was very articulate in putting forward his points why the motion should not be allowed. The speaker was calling to give clarification and to give clarity on whether or not the motion is rightly was properly put. The speaker came in and he said that, among other comments that he made, he said that the motion was indeed properly put. So, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Patterson, given that information from the clerk, not the speaker, sorry. Mr. Patterson, given that information from the clerk, decided to recuse himself from that seat to allow for the motion to be put to a vote. At that point in time, no other member of the opposition side of the House took the seat as chair, and we were left at a standstill, basically because the members of the opposition has full confidence in Mr. David Patterson to chair the PAC. And it so happens that the standing order specifically states, and I can read it, that the chairman of the PAC must be a member of the main opposition in the assembly. So there was no deviating, and there was no opportunity for anyone from the PPP to chair that meeting. So we were left at a standstill, and the clerk was basically left in a situation that was never experienced before in Guyana. And I can further say, when the clerk came in, he made reference to the fact that he did research on how to move forward with this matter, and I specifically asked him if any other parliaments within the Commonwealth had this issue before, if there was any precedence that argument that he is following to say how this should proceed moving forward. And what I can tell you and everyone listening here right now is that there is no precedent. Never before, not once, did any other government stood up in any other Commonwealth Parliament and said they wanted a chair of the PAC removed. And that's simply because, Chris, the PAC is there to scrutinize the spending of the government. And it is ludicrous. It is madness for any government to want that they must have control over who chairs the committee that scrutinizes the way in which they spend money. It has never been attempted before because it is utter craziness.
I want to jump in. Right there. So the proposed replacement that the PPP is proposing happens to be that of Lennox Schumann. Now, just before we started this course on Lennox Schumann stood up as an independent with his political party leading into the elections. He is on record as stating that he will never join with either the APNU-AFC coalition or the People's Progressive Party Civic, that he intends to be one that will be in the National Assembly to hold both sides accountable, and that he will ensure that he gives representation to the people of this country, particularly those of indigenous people who he claims to represent. Immediately after the election impasse, Lennox Schumann was appointed advisor to the government at the aviation sector, receiving some $500,000+ per month. Lots of other benefits, including transportation, electricity, all of these things being paid for him. In the National Assembly, the PPP did use their majority, which essentially is what was known for, and they on the National Assembly Lennox Schumann as the deputy of the deputy speaker of the parliament. On every bill motion that we debated since the commencement of Parliament, Lennox Schumann has taken the side of the PPP. So essentially, we say that in the Parliament, the PPP essentially has 44 seats, 33 on the side where they sit, 1 on the opposition side, which happens to be that of Lennox Schumann. So Lennox Schumann is essentially, quote unquote, with the boys. Now here it is that the PPP wants to voice on the PAC, Lennox Schumann, who happens to be a representative of the PPP. Now, how could you have what you would call in the middle? You have Lennox Schumann, who is PPP, scrutinizing what the PPP does. in the parliament. Now, we spoke about the dictatorial tendencies of the PPP. We saw their dictatorship at work in local government, in which you had several local government elections that were had in the various NDCs. And because the person or persons who were elected, the PPP doesn't find favor with them, their elections have been ruled null and void. And until they identify individuals are favorable, then those questions are. So across the entire spectrum of this country, the dictatorial tendencies of the PPP have taken hold. And now you see that they're trying to control every facet of society. That is dictatorship. You know, we say that
Yeah.
dictatorship is creeping in, but I think it moved from creeping, it's now walking. You know, it is now walking. And here it is blatantly in the eyes of not only the Guyanese but the international community. The PPP now is extending their dictatorial tendencies, their dictatorship, now in the Public Accounts Committee. Annette Jurito.
Well, Christopher, if I may jump in here,
Yes,
even
and
before, even before I examine, the likely person that the PPP might be proposing to replace David, we have to remind the viewers, as Joretta rightfully said, the Public Accounts Committee, like in previous parliaments, right, was chaired by an opposition person. We
It's
had
right,
in
it's enshrined in the
it,
standing
yeah,
orders.
it's in the standing orders, right? We had in the 11th parliament, no less of a person who is now the illegitimate or de facto president, Irfan Ali, who has in excess of 19 fraud charges to his name, coupled with he can show we qualifications, whether he degree, he masters, or he doctorate, and all these manner of things. But yet he he was placed to chair the Public Accounts Committee in the 10th Parliament, in the 11th Parliament. Sorry, you did not see a riled up by the then government, the APNU AFC government, us condemning him not being the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, though he had these charges were before the court of law. We know that these charges were before the court of law. Now you have David Patterson, who has been unanimously elected by the main opposition in the parliament, which is the APNU AFC. We we appointed him to sit as the chairman for the Public Accounts Committee. There is no David Patterson has not there's the court has not decided on the frivolous trump up charges they've now brought against David Patterson. You know what I mean? So you keep hearing in the being peddled there in the public domain that, oh, you have lost all confidence in David Patterson. What has he done? What confidence have you lost in him? Um, I forget the latest utterance by the bishop Egil. So these things, they don't have no merit. You understand me? So we, as the opposition, we have to stand firm against the PPP trying to impose Mr. Lennox Schumann as the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. Because mind you, Christopher, we have to let the public know how this thing actually works. For all the parliamentary committees, there is a committee that is established, a committee called the Committee of Selection. You have the committee of selection. That is a committee that agrees on the various on the members that were proposed by their respective parties to
That's
sit
right.
as members on the other committee. So even before Mr. Schumann is given the blessings to be the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, this nomination will now have to come before the committee of selection. And we know that, that's where the battle will start. That is where the battle will start, because we in the opposition benches, we will not consent to Mr. Schumann's being the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, because as you rightfully describe, Christopher, it's as though you're putting cat for watch milk. Schumann is being paid, is a government, is work is getting, apart from his parliamentary um, earnings
Sorry.
as a deputy chairman, a deputy speaker, sorry. He is also getting um, monies from the consolidated funds, because these monies, based on the answers we got from the Minister of Public Works, is that the money is being used to pay the advisor on aviation, which is no less of a person as Schumann. Those monies are being warranted from the Ministry of Finance to Public Works to pay Mr. Lennox Schumann $500,000 per month. That's one. Plus
Yeah.
additional benefits, which would be telephone allowances, probably internet and entertainment and all manner of things. So we cannot
Yeah.
and we will not allow this.
Correct. Jurito, sorry, let me just cover. Is Vince Roy Jordan in the background? All right, I saw a note from him earlier. All right, Jurita, closing. What is expected next in terms of the PAC? Will there be another a meeting of such?
Well, I can speak from our side, Chris. The opposition has been ready and has been showing up to do work. Even last Monday, the opposition members of the PAC were the last to leave Parliament, because we're there to work. We're not there to halt the work or to hold back work that we're supposed to be doing. Now, what I want to I'm speaking a little bit about the committee of selection and so forth. And what persons need to understand is that, yes, indeed, we have these standing orders in which we're guided by. I'm going to be quite blunt in how we're looking at this. However, the PP can always go to Parliament to have those standing orders amended. And because in light of them having a majority in the House, those things can be amended. Because right now, as it stands, the government, the main opposition, takes the chairmanship of the PAC. However, the PP still have to go to the House and to have amendments made to those standing orders. When it comes to the representation, well, I saw it circulating in the media also that Mr. Schumann is tipped to be the new chair of the PAC. Listen to me, Chris. There's a lot that politicians can do. There's a lot that you can utilize your power to do in politics in the House, but I can tell you this. Represents a significant constituent. And the PPP must never, ever, ever forget that. The PPP can go to Parliament and they can do all the gymnastics and they can find all the loopholes that best suit their interests. What I can say, Chris, and I think I can wrap it up by saying that the actions of the PPP spells out a couple of things. Number one, that the PPP is completely afraid of Mr. David Paterson as chair of the PAC. He has been there, and the PPP is afraid of him. The PPP is running from scrutiny. That is the second thing that is obvious right about now. They're running from scrutiny. They do not want the PAC to function, and that is why we had to wait until 2021 to even have the first meeting of the PAC, because as we all would remember, several letters were written just to get the first meeting of the PAC. Now, what is my third point is that there's only one reason the PAC is running from scrutiny, that they have, and I said a level of corruption because we all know that PP is corrupt on every platform. What I believe that they're trying to do now is to even accelerate those corrupt practices that they have. So they need Mr. Patterson removed because he knows exactly what should and should not be done. And the fourth point is that The PPP have absolutely no interest in democracy right now. They are trying to control everything. And what I can tell you, Chris, is that we have, and I'll throw in a jab right now because if you can remember quite clearly, we had so many fighters for democracy. What was the name that they were referred to?
Guardian of
Um,
democracy.
Guardians of
Guardians.
democracy. Thank you, Annette. We had so many guardians of democracy looking for democracy, and today the media is packed with reports that the PPP is trying to decide who scrutinized their spending. So the guardians of democracy have all vanished.
Mhm.
A direct attack on democracy in the country, something that have implications in other parliaments as well, because we are setting precedents when we deal with this matter and how we deal with it at a parliamentary level. Other Commonwealth parliaments have never had this before, and moving forward, whatever decision is made in the Parliament of Guyana will have implications in other parliaments. The PPP is on a road to destroy any aspect of democracy. They have not been inclusive in any matter whatsoever. I know the coalition has taken the high road when it comes to the foreign affairs ministry and the matters that are before us right now when we talk about Venezuela and so forth. But that was a decision making by the coalition. That was not something that the PPP reached out to the coalition for. The PPP is not engaged in the coalition for anything because they want to go forward as though they are the only party that exists. And I can tell you as much, Chris, whilst Annette mentioned it, whilst we were in office, we had the chairman of the PAC having numerous question marks above his head, but that person was left to be the chair of the PAC because that is how democracy works. That is in the essence of democracy. The government spends the money, the opposition scrutinizes the spending. The PPP is trying to remove that aspect of democracy, and as we all know as Guyanese, why they would try to do that. But Chris, at the end of the day, we have a responsibility as representatives of the coalition. We have a constituent to represent, and we must do at all times what is in the best interest of that constituent, and that is how we will move forward.
Excellent. Well said. Annette Ferguson, Jurita Finance, thank you very much for being on lunch break. I know you guys wanted us to discuss the whole Charan Das Prasad being appointed ambassador representing Guyana in India. I know the Kaiser News, is it, Jurita, had some choice words to the PPP as it relates to Charan Das Prasad being appointed ambassador to India. But what more could you expect? This is the same PPP that we come to know over the last 23 years. All of them sundry are aware in terms of what Guyana went through, how Guyana was labeled by the international community, and it appears clearly that Guyana is indeed heading back in that direction.
I believe that honestly that we have bigger fish to fry than to discuss Charan Das Prasad. That's not somebody that I have any interest in discussing at all. I don't think I need to use any of my energy to waste it on such a character. So I refuse.
It seems like India. It seems like India is the dumping ground for persons of his type, because you guys would recall when you had Gadraj, right? When he was embroiled in the whole Phantom Death Squad that he was directing as the Minister of Home Affairs. And when after that impasse, they packed him up and they moved him as the ambassador to India. And here comes again. So like India, PPP is used India as the dump site. Take this garbage, take this trash. So the latest trash that the PPP is throwing to India is Charan Das Prasad. Annette Ferguson, Jurita Finance, thank you very much for being on lunch break. Viewers, we invite you right back here at 5 o'clock this afternoon, in which my colleague Randolph Critchlow will lead us off in the afternoon rush. And of course, at 8 o'clock this evening, we invite you to ringside with my colleague Sherrod Duncan. Until then, have a pleasant rest of your day. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So we're not in the realm of supposition anymore. We know for a fact that people have voted. We know for a fact that people who are not in the jurisdiction would have voted. We know for a fact that there are 47 ballot boxes without documents. These are facts that are incontrovertible. It's not up for debate. We're not unsure about these things. And so I think the only reason that we ended up at a petition was that the court recognized that while everybody in fact recognized that whilst we have discovered these anomalies and irregularities, the mechanism through which we could address them is an elections petition. So it does not negate the fact of the findings. It does not negate the fact that the PPP has not been able to refute these allegations. And so even with this throwing out of the petition, temporarily I would say, because I believe we have very, very strong prospects in terms of appeal, the PPP has not convinced anybody that they have not gotten there by illegitimate means. Because the very mechanism through which we were going to receive, as it were, the imprimatur of the court to say that these actions were illegal, it is the same mechanism through which the PPP could have acquitted themselves of these charges. And so these facts remain, and this is what I want to encourage our people. Don't be disheartened by this. The facts are the facts.